Chapter 5. When Carrie forced her eyes open the next morning, a hotel room appeared. She had no idea where she was. A headache threatened to split her skull, and a vague memory plagued her of a rambunctious time with a man who kept calling her Blondie. A moment later, she remembered. This was Poodle, South Carolina, and she'd found one more reason to call it hell. Stumbling to the bathroom, she recalled being harangued by someone who was annoyed with her for the way she treated her friend. Had she dreamed the people waving menacing pool cues? It was all a blur. They must have mistaken her for someone else. No one in this town knew her. Well, two did. May, the owner of the marina, and Willie Bob, the substance abuser on the houseboat. Will had been at the bar, wasted. He wouldn't remember her name. She sighed. Oh well, it was a small town with a small town's enthusiastic grapevine. Perhaps everyone knew the name of any newcomer within minutes of their arrival. She'd have to be prepared for notoriety. She ran a hand through her hair, scratched an itch at her hairline, then another and another. There was a bump behind her ear, and then her neck itched, and her fingers found another bump. A mosquito bite. She tried not to scratch. As she opened the bathroom door, her reflection jumped out at her from across the room, and she gasped. She looked like a monster. A row of red welts followed her hairline. There were more, near her ear and down her neck. Her forearms looked like they'd been struck by a severe case of acne. She groaned. Shower, coffee. In the motel's coffee shop, she downed cup after cup, along with a plate of eggs and grits. She emptied her mind, ignoring the many itching bites, and tried hard to think. So the sand fleas got you last night, huh? Said the waitress as she filled Carrie's cup for the fourth time. What? Said Carrie, jerked from her reverie. Pardon me, did you say fleas? Yes, ma'am, sand fleas. You got a few bites. Carrie fingered the welt on her neck. I thought they were mosquito. Oh no, we don't have many mosquitoes here no more. What with all the spraying. What we got is sand fleas. That's what locals call them. Y'all might call them gnats or no-see-ums. Those that are sensitive to them get the welts like you got there. But at least we don't get malaria. She laughed. So that's why I didn't see what was biting me. Carrie looked at the marks on her arms, and why they don't feel like mosquito bites. The itch don't last, but the gnats themselves can be pretty annoying. You best get yourself some bug spray, she said as she moved to the next table, and make sure it says it's good for gnats, because the mosquito stuff don't work on the little buggers. Carrie groaned. Great. How much more diabolical could this place get? Back at the boat, Carrie put on the shorts and t-shirts she'd trashed during her first cleaning session the day before. In addition, she now sported heavy-duty rubber gloves and a coating of greasy gnat repellent. Standing on the dock, she took stock of her project. I saw you putting on a little bug spray. She jumped. Willie Bob had come up beside her while she was peering up at the masthead. He didn't look any worse for his night at the bar. You don't need it during the day, he said. They only come out in the morning and evening. Now you tell me, she said, gingerly scratching an oily bump with the back of a nail. He didn't look quite so scruffy this morning. His beard, though trimmed, still went every which way, along with his hair. It was strange how matched they were. She peered back and forth between his head and his face, wondering if he'd actually brushed them that way. Mercifully, he didn't smell as bad as she expected. What you up to? He asked, gazing up at the masthead. I have to replace the VHF antenna and the light. She gave him a look. Any chance you've got experience winching a bosun's chair up a mast? Her ascender was among the things she'd not been able to find, and climbing gear wasn't available in a small coastal town. The closest climbing store was a 6-hour drive away. Sure, I've done it a couple of times. He looked around. Good time, too. No breeze, no bugs. I'll buy you a beer after, she said, then cringed, remembering his condition of the night before. From all appearances, this guy had a substance problem, and from the stream of scuzz buckets coming and going, she wouldn't be surprised to learn he was selling dope right out of his boat. She'd better not trust him with her life. Except, I'm not quite ready. I have to check on some things first. She gave him a toothy grin. He crossed his arms. You think I'm a druggie. He uncrossed his arms and stuck his hand out, palm down. That's not the case. Totally sober, steady as a rock. I won't drop you. She felt the flush crawl up her cheeks. It was probably setting off the bug bite welts in a really becoming way. No, I don't know whether my gear is in good shape. My ex trashed everything. The bosun's chair might be compromised. Let me get that and my tools in order, then we'll see. He shrugged. Suit yourself. May has a bosun's chair she lends out, and I've got all the tools you could want. I should be around all day. Bang on the side of my boat when you want to go up. Carrie thanked him and headed straight to the office to talk to May. Oh yeah, far as I know, he's trustworthy. He doesn't look like much, but that's the live-aboard life, she laughed. A few of his friends seem to be down on their luck, but Will pays regular, doesn't hassle anybody, helps out when folks need a hand. And just in case, May bent behind the counter and came up with a bundle of canvas and line. My bosun's chair has a tether. She held up the big carabiner spliced into one end of the attached line. You can clip it into any loop or eye bolt you find up there, and you'll be secure. If there's a loop or an eye bolt up there that's uncompromised. Well, yes, it does look like it took a bit of a whack. As she walked back down the dock, Carrie checked out the masthead. There was some kind of loop up there, though it was too much to hope that Alex hadn't smashed it. She sighed. What could she do but go for it? Until the VHF and the light were replaced, there was no going anywhere. Even if the rest of the boat had been pristine, she wouldn't head out into the Atlantic without a radio and a light. If she stayed on the Intercoastal, the ICW, there were a bazillion bridges she'd need to hail. She knocked on the side of the houseboat, then walked to the transom. What was the name of this hulk? She'd never noticed. Bite me. Hoo boy, nothing like advertising the old attitude. Will stuck his tousled head over the rail and looked down at her. Ready to go up? He popped the last bite of his breakfast into his mouth and came down the ladder. Yep, pretty soon. She gulped down a sense of panic. Let me get this clipped into the halyard and rig up my tools and I'll be ready. She boarded her own boat, thinking one last time that this might not be so smart. She stepped into the bosun's chair, fastened the clips, and did a final adjustment on the straps. Was that a falafel? Will was organizing the halyard and looked up at her with a puzzled frown. Yeah, I get 'em at a little gas station / Mediterranean grocery out by the bridge. Why? You want one? There are a couple more. Her image of him tilted again. No, thanks. I'm surprised to see them in such a small town. Who was this guy who ate Lebanese bean balls for breakfast? He sure didn't fit her backwater drug dealer stereotype. What's that? Will asked, nodding at the loop of line she was tying. I'm creating a prusik. It's a special knot that hangs onto the halyard by friction, for safety. It also gives me a place to stand to get a little higher up and see the top of the masthead. On the way up, she slid the prusik along and also kept a leg and an arm wrapped around the mast, clinging for stability, but trying not to impede progress. Will was strong, and though he appeared to be in no hurry, she went up pretty fast. About 10 feet from the top of the 55-foot pole, she suddenly switched from worrying that he would drop her to worrying that, despite his claims of sobriety, he'd forget about her and walk away. She'd be stuck up here. As soon as she was within reach of the masthead loop, she clipped in, tested the strength of the hardware, and when it held, relaxed a little. Legs hugging the pole, she leaned back, took out her cell phone, and took several pictures of the top of the masthead. It would help the East Marine crew get the right parts. She snapped a few selfies, including one that showed her and Will far below on deck, looking up. She sent that one to Kat with the hashtag, keeping my distance. Then she turned her attention to the job. After testing the prusik one last time, she put her whole weight onto it and stood to get a good look at the masthead. The damage wasn't as bad as expected. The VHF antenna snapped off about an inch above its base, so all she needed to do was buy a new one and screw it in place. The connector was even in good shape. The light was a little more complex. It stood on an inch-wide post and presented more resistance. One of the bolts had completely pulled out of the masthead, stripping the nut right off. The plate around the hole even looked bent. All the fixed bridges of the ICW, as far as she knew, were at least the standard 65 feet high. Alex must have gone too quickly or too slowly through one of the bascule bridges and caught it as it was lifting or coming down. Her guess was lifting. He could sometimes be impatient. Plus, if a bridge were coming down, it would do far more than swipe at a light. It would freaking crush this little wisp of a mast. She got out her wrenches, removed the antenna base, and stuck it in her pocket. Then she started on the light, pulling pieces of broken plastic away and sticking those in her pockets, so they wouldn't fall into the water. She wasn't going to be responsible for some little fish dying with a gut full of stuff it couldn't digest. She reached up for the first nut and her phone rang. Carrie jumped and fumbled the wrenches. One was tied to her wrist, but still it threatened to slip off as she grappled with the other one that had no hole for a string. "Heads up!" she called down to Will, assuming he was still down there. "Heads up!" But then she got hold of both wrenches again and settled back in the seat, heart racing. She pulled out her still jiving phone. It was Kat. "Hey, Kat," she said nonchalant, sending a thumbs-up sign down to Will. "What's up?" "Well, from this picture you sent me, I guess you are. Which means you're working on the boat." "Yep, I am at the top of the mast as we speak. I took your advice and started repairs. Did I tell you that in addition to all the other joys Alex brought into my life, he managed to hit a bridge?" "No, but I'm not surprised. But Alex being gone is the least of your worries. Who is that caveman on the deck with all the hair?" "That's Will. I told you about him, my neighbor. He's helping." "Did you let that hoist you up the mast? Are you going to tell me he's the one in control of whether you live or die? Is that the low-life scum you told me about who lives on a half-sunken barge? You are trusting that man with your life? What the fuck, Carrie? Did you at least do a background check?" "Hey, you're the one who encouraged me to keep this little shitbox and fix her up. That's what I'm doing, and well, I know he's pretty rough-looking, but he seems trustworthy, and he's what was available. Besides, I don't think a check would help. I'm pretty sure he's here under an assumed identity." "Well, of course. What happy news. Yeah, I encouraged you to work on the boat and even have a good time with some guy. Party, vacation your ass off after hours, but letting some substance abuser hold the end of your lifeline, that's going a little overboard." "Calm down, Kat. Besides, it's a bit late to worry. As I said, I'm at the top. I'm clipped in with a harness and wrapped on a winch designed to hold thousands of pounds of force. I can't fall unless the bosun's chair breaks apart, and it's not going to do that. I inspected it before I agreed to use it. And I'm not going to speak further about other factors right now. Great. As long as I'm on record as having a bad feeling about some of your factors. You should stay away from this, Willie. Help me, Jesus, even that name is untrustworthy. Relax, I'm not getting within 6 feet of Will. Though you should keep in mind that Alex was always impeccable, and look how that turned out. But regardless of looks, I'm busy here, and men are not on the agenda. If one of them gets too close, I'll throw him in the water. Best not to remind Kat that she'd already had to do that. Anyway, thanks for calling. You've put me in the proper mood to safely finish this job. Carrie laughed and glanced down to see if Will was listening to all this. He wasn't. He was on the dock talking with a tubby, bald guy. They weren't even looking up at her. They were both speaking with their hands, gesticulating. The guy pointed at something in the water. He mimed what looked like screwing parts together. Hey, gotta go. My deckhand might get a better offer and wander away. Call me as soon as you're back at sea level. I won't be able to quit pacing until I hear you're safe. And if I don't hear from you, I'm getting on the next available plane to come down there and shoot Willie Bob.